before the highway. And Guy and I and the kids, we used to go up there and camp. Oh, and it was so much fun. And for my wedding, we had the big table out here, and the beer was down in the stream. Can you believe that?
To keep it cold.
Yes. I'm Linda Bordner.
And why does that name Bordner sound familiar?
Because my father, Armar Border, built this home. And with my mother, her name was Margaret, and oh, she was just a beautiful lady. And they both lived here, and they loved it. And then I was almost born here, but my mother made it into the hospital, so, but then they came back out here and they lived here. Mom was an Oliver. In fact, her brother was well known, Chuck Oliver. He played basketball, and so he was well known in Lebanon. But my mother worked for the Lebanon Steel Foundry until a year before she passed away, and she passed away from emphysema at age 59. Well, you know, back those days, they didn't have the inhalers or the nebulizers and things like we have nowadays, or nowadays they even give you oxygen.
Yes.
And I guess they didn't back then.
Dorothy Ettinger from Ohio, Medina, Ohio. Her mother and my mother were sisters. So my mother lived in Ohio for 60-some years, but she always thought she was coming back to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. That's where she's from and where, you know, her mother, they were all raised. Fortunately, when we did come back every single summer, we always came back to see Linda and her mother, of course, and always came to the cabin. So I have spent a lot of summers here at this place.
What's your favorite memory?
Well, probably exploring the waterfall there and seeing the waterfall, listening to the water running at night when you went to sleep. I was telling the other gal over there, I stayed in her bedroom. She had bunk beds, so I was usually on the top bunk bed. And of course the logs were pretty close to me, and I'd always put the sheet over me because I was afraid spiders or snakes were going to come out of the logs.
That could have happened.
I know. So I was always, that was a different thing, being that close to logs and being out here. So I remember that. But also, as you can see over there, there's two sets of hooks for swing. So Linda and I, we used to swing way back.
I forgot about that,
inside this house, and we loved doing that.
Was that up on the balcony?
No, right here.
Right on that big main
Oh,
lawn
yes,
across
okay.
there. Yeah, and we'd
I can
swing
tell you
clear
one
back
time-
back to the loft area.
Yes.
I mean, we'd get that swing going.
In fact, my one girlfriend was on it one time, and I finished saying to her, "Oh my goodness, if that rope breaks, you're going to fall right on some lady's lap that was sitting over here." And do you know, the rope broke right after I said that, and she went flying down and hit by her feet.
Oh my.
So talk about a coincidence.
Not too many children can say they had a swing in the house.
No, not at all.
no.
That's what was so unique.
I'm glad you thought of that.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that.
Well, Linda, you didn't tell me what your favorite memory was here.
I can tell you, I think it was Uncle Carol a couple times dressed as Santa Claus, and some of my cousins were here. I don't think you were here
I
at
don't
the
think
time.
we made
no,
winter trips.
and he would come and you'd hear the sleigh bells, you know, because my father always had those antique sleigh bells, and he'd come in and ho ho ho. Those were wonderful memories, and memories of having my friends over here for sleepovers, or friends being able to have clam bakes up at the top of the falls there. We had wonderful times out here. This was a great place. And it was great also because the one thing my father really did with me was take me on walks through the woods and would teach me about certain plants and animals. And that's probably why I have my love for animals and birds.
I remember when they lived in town, we'd come on a weekend because my Aunt Margaret was always work during the week. So we'd pack up the big picnic baskets, and then we'd stop in Lickdale. There was a grocery store there, a little store there. We'd always stop there and always get an ice cream cone, and then we'd come out here and unload and everything. They had that huge picnic table here, and we'd sit here, and her mother was out of this world kind of cook, so it was like a treat. And we'd sit and watch the falls, and when the falls were in full bloom, it was just fantastic to see that water coming down here. And some of the things Linda and I did, we used to go down in the pond there at the lower falls and catch crayfish.
Oh yes, did we ever catch crayfish?
Yeah.
I had that little antique stove, and I'd get twigs in it. Of course, my parents didn't know I was doing that at the time. And I'd start those twigs on fire, and I'd put those crayfish in with some water in a tiny little kid's bucket or a pot, and put a lid on it and cook those crayfish. Well, of course, my father caught me, and that was a no-no. But yeah,
No
you're
cooking
right.
crayfish, yeah.
Isn't
And then we used to go down across the road and set up a shooting range, and that's first place I ever shot a shotgun was here down across the road. We used to do that.
Did Armar hunt?
Not too much. I can remember when I was very young, he would go, but he wasn't the type to really want to kill a deer. But he stood here one time, and he had different, I don't know where the men were from, they were friends of his, I guess, and they came over here for hunting, and they stayed here, and my father was making the spaghetti, but he didn't know he had to put it in boiling water. He put it in the cold water and had this big glob of pasta.
What was your mother's best dish or favorite dish?
Oh, she made good stuffed pork chops, and her chocolate cake was out of this world.
Or coconut cake.
Oh,
She made a coconut cake.
oh, well, that I don't remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Her chocolate cake was the main one that my kids and I remember, because it had the chocolate peanut butter icing on top, and hers were so moist. Chocolate was my kids and myself. Ours favorite was the chocolate.
My Aunt Margaret was a beautiful woman.
I saw.
She had a brother who died, in the 40s, I guess. And the two of them looked like Hollywood stars when they were together. He was so handsome, and her mother,
Yeah,
brother
they did.
and sister, they were.
People used to think they looked like movie stars
Yeah,
walking
people
together.
would stop and look at them when they would go out. They were beautiful. She was a lovely, lovely person. I just loved her.
She wasn't only beautiful, she had a personality that was to die for. She was just a sweetheart of a person. If there were people that lived there way before they made it into a park, those people could stay living and people could still go through. That's the way it should have been here. We should have been able to keep the cabin, and they could have taken all the land around us, but kept us this little bit of land. And we never minded when people would come here and want to come up to the waterfalls. We would always go out and talk to them and tell them the history of the falls and things like that. Colonel Benjamin Aycrgg, and he was the man that was the contractor or the...
I thought he originally owned the land.
He was the man that did the Union canals. He was in charge of that. In fact, I was told this is the only place with a waterfall like this in Pennsylvania.
I don't know.
I think it
in
was
Lebanon County, I know we don't have anything like it.
Well,
A friend who just did the Appalachian Trail, and she started in Georgia and went through Pennsylvania, I think. Then she went up north in Maine to come back down since it was getting cold weather. But since the Appalachian Trail is so close to this, would this be a possible shelter?
In a storm, of
future,
course, it would
would
certainly
they
be a
have
shelter.
access
They
to
can
it?
stop here and eat. However, with the labor and industry permits, we were not, it's another level up to be able to have occupancy for like overnights
Yeah,
and things like
yeah,
that.
I just
So
wondered.
we didn't go to that because I think you'd have to have running water and toilets inside, I don't know what all you'd have to have. But anything you do has to come up to current code. So just to get it to assembly, this is taking all this time and money and people to do. Our vision is that We have it open for the public to come and go during park hours, which is sunrise to sunset. Or what we can do is hopefully get people that would help us with some donations if they would like to host a family reunion or a wedding, things of that nature. And those donations would help us because we have to maintain the property like we're doing now.
Oh, yeah.
So,
But you'd have to have water facilities here and...
no, not.
Oh, you wouldn't have
No,
it?
that's for picnicking. This is essentially a big picnic pavilion right now.
Oh, okay.
So just like you would reserve a picnic pavilion,
Okay.
you could reserve it for a party like that.
Yeah.
And then, but you would not be staying here overnight where you
Yeah.
would have to have showers and things like that.
I do want to say before we close, I just bless all you people for doing this job of keeping this cabin together, because it's been, as Linda said, such a precious memory for several families that have enjoyed this. And God bless you for doing all the work you do, because this is not an easy project, and for taking it on. It's just to preserve it for future generations.
Well, thank you. The team that we
It's
have.
wonderful.
Thank you. The team that we have is doing an excellent job, and
I
your
can
your
see.
your wishes and your praise will be shared with them.
Well, I hope so.
Thank you. Okay, now I know that you were born, you said, after the cabin was done,
Just about finished.
just about finished. But I saw pictures where there were all kinds of parties going on.
Oh,
Can you tell us about the activities?
yes. The barbershop quartets used to come here and party. The Lebanon Steel Foundry had many parties out here, practically every year.
Was your dad a barbershop quartetter?
Yes, he was.
Oh, that's new information.
Yeah,
so
he
he
was
was
a tenor.
A tenor, okay.
Yeah, Ed Reber and Heisey and I think his name was Charlie Young.
Okay.
They were the quartet. I used to travel around with them.
Okay. Now, I heard stories that some kids would come back here and your dad maybe had a ski area or something.
No, but down the road from here, they had a bobsled run, and he made a bobsled. But I guess it turned out to be too dangerous, so they quit doing that.
Okay. Did your dad ever talk about building the cabin?
Not that often. I think sometimes you know a little bit more about the cabin than I did. But no, he was just very proud of it, and I guess I just took it for granted because I lived here. You know, I moved from here, I think I was probably, Dot, do you remember how old when we moved from here? My parents lived here until I was probably about 4, and then they moved into town, and then when I was in high school, we moved back out here again.
So there was a period of absence and it was just his summer home for a while.
Oh, yeah. Well, we were here in the wintertime. We were here practically almost every weekend.
The logs are not just set on top of each other. The bottoms of the top log is, I guess it would be concave, and the one below it is convex.
Yeah.
And then they have the horsehair chinking between.
Right, but I didn't know that about the logs. My mother and I were both asthmatic, and I can remember my father put in a very expensive furnace, and it would pull out the particulars out of the air. And after that, she and I both did pretty good out here. Tiny little trouts that were in there. But like I told you, my father had dammed up a certain little section to the stream, and he had some trout in there, which we had to feed every day.
And what else was down there?
Well, then down, coming closer to the main road, he had a big pond, and he had his black swans in there, who tried to kill him one time when he went in to clean the place because that drake wasn't going to let him near his little female.
So they had black swans. Was there anything else down here?
Well, then over by where there used to be the workshop, he had the dogs. He had some of my old English sheepdogs that I raised at that time. And he also had quail. And he even had an incubator to hatch quail eggs. But I don't think that worked out too well for him, but I know he raised some quail. Never saw a bear here. You imagine, I used to walk these woods never thinking I'd see a bear. I mean, a deer would be fine, but a bear I don't think I wanted to see. But now I can tell you, I raised a raccoon, and we had over on one of the big pine trees over here across the stream, my father put up a big box out there for that raccoon, and that's where that raccoon lived for years. And I had a groundhog, and the groundhog lived out here. In fact, for years we used to have my son came out here one time. In fact, it was for my father's 90th birthday party. We went out there, and my son went out there and started going, chick, 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 chick. And my God, didn't a groundhog come out.
What about cooking on this old cook stove that was in the kitchen?
Well, that one was, now my mother, I guess, had an old cook stove like that when they first moved in here. And she knew how to cook on that because my father's mother had taught her how to cook. That's what she always used, was one of those old stoves. But then when they moved here to live permanently, they took that one out, and my mother had an electric stove in here. But then, when my mother passed away, my father went and got that old stove and put it in. Now, when my father was here and he was sick, I did not know how to start that stove. But I learned that if you could take some paper and a lot of kindling and then put some other, he had coal here at the time, and I got the coal going, and I got that stove up to 400 degrees, and so it kept us a little warm in here when we had no electricity during a storm.
Oh, during the storms. Yeah, I didn't think about that. You dropped electricity. You were at the end of the line.
We sure were. Nobody would come back in here then.
And then you had to cut your way out. I bet the trees fell across the road.
My father would take care of things like that, but then the county came and took care of a lot of it. They checked on my father quite a bit.
Now, he had a Jeep, according to tale.
Yes.
Did he always have a Jeep?
No. He had that Jeep for a few years, and he had a snowplow on it. Then he went to the car and a little truck with a camper on it.
The upstairs is always intriguing to the kids. Was that where your bedroom was?
No, my bedroom was straight back there.
Okay.
And then my parents was right over in here, and that had bunk beds in it. But when I threw parties sometimes, sleepovers, they'd sleep up in there. Now, I couldn't sleep up there. My asthma wouldn't take it up there. And that he had, towards the end, he had a lot of storage up in there. In fact, even when I was clearing out this place, I came across snake skins up in those rafters. Oh, my.
So the snakes were here all the time and you didn't know it?
Well, yes. In fact, my father had the barbershop quartet, I think, were out here one day, and we had the big red circular sofa sitting underneath that big rafter. And my dad knew he had a snake up in there, because he said he knew it had been up there for days, and he knew it was getting weak. And they were singing, and they were, stomping and everything. And that snake fell down on some man. That scared the devil out of that poor man. I thought he died. But those are some of the things. And my father certainly didn't think anything of it, because he'd just go pick them up. But, to the average person that weren't used to being around the wildlife that we had here and the snakes and all. And I know we used to get copperheads around here.
Really?
And my father used to go out and kill those, but never saw a rattlesnake, but copperheads we had here.
Mike noticed that in the big bedroom over here to the side, it looks like the floor was lowered because it
Now
looked
that
like...
wasn't a bedroom. The one over in there? No, that was my father's study. That was filled with his drafting table and a chair and books and magazines. Oh my, that was just filled.
And that was to the very end.
Yes.
All the hand railings and everything were all done by the time you were born.
Oh yes, that was to protect me.
Was there any... Oh.
In fact, yes, my father had to make sure that those were up because he didn't want me falling through there. In fact, we had a big copper kettle right here. And there were logs in it, And my father sanded down all those logs so I wouldn't get splinters. Well, just putting up that storage shed out there in his workshop. That was the only thing, other than he tried to keep up with the things around here.
The maintenance.
And that's when he bought the water wheel and wanted to do that. But that was an expense, and so much money was spent fighting the state on this eminent domain on taking this place. We really thought that this house would come down to me and then to my kids. And my boys they worship coming over here. They love this place. And when we lost this was just a tragedy to our family. You saw me starting to cry just when I first got here. I mean, this is hard for me because I love this place so much.
You taking the time today to allow us to videotape you helps to keep Armar's memory alive, and hopefully in some small way helps you to grieve and get through this whole process, because...
Well, and you have to remember my mother was a big part of this too. I'm between her decorating and her helping pay for these things, because my father was a school teacher, and then when the school teachers weren't making that much money, he worked for the Lebanon Steel Foundry for years, and then later on in life he went back to teaching again. It's hard to leave some place that your parents put so much time and effort into, and then all the money that was spent fighting the state over this place being taken. It's hard. It really is hard to look at it and come back. It's hard for me to talk about.
He truly believed what he was fighting for.
Oh, yes. Yes, so did my mother. Yeah, I think when he first started to build this, my mother thought he was just going to put up a little tiny cabin. She didn't know it was going to turn out to be this big.
I guess that's another unique aspect. When you look at Little House on the Prairie, most of the cabins were just rectangles.
Yeah.
And this actually has 4 levels to it.
Oh, yeah.
You have the basement and what you say was his workshop. You have the first floor, and then you have the loft upstairs. I don't know that I've ever seen a hand-built cabin this intricate. Okay, Linda, thank you for your patience as we get resituated here. Now, we were talking about your mother, and you told me how she passed away. And was that at the hospital, or was it here at this place?
No, she was shopping in Reading at the factory outlets. She was coming out the next week to visit with me in Colorado. Guy was there for his internship and residency, and we were going to have her stay with my 3 boys. I didn't realize she was as bad as she was, but she went to the factory outlets, and she was in Vanity Fair. I think it was Vanity Fair. Anyway, she was picking up some underwear and clothing to bring out for me, and she told her mother, that's my cousin that's with me, Dot, her mother was with my mother, and she said to her sister, she said, I'm going to go in and try on this outfit, and she walked away, and my aunt didn't really look at her, and she didn't come out, and they went back in, and she was dead in the dressing room.
How sad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for that loss. And
Well, it was terrible.
And so
they called me, Colorado, to let us know, and that was like losing my best friend. She wasn't just a mother, she was my sister, my closest friend.
Okay. So then, Mom passed away. She was 59, and Dad was living here then alone for a while.
Yeah,
Tell us about those years.
Well, he stayed out here, and he was here until he died at 90 years of age.
And was his all of a sudden like Mom's, his death?
No, he had cancer, prostate cancer. No, it wasn't prostate, pancreatic cancer. And he wasn't feeling well for about 6 months, and we came home to have his 90th birthday party, my sons and I, and he just didn't look well. So I flew back to Arizona with my kids, and then packed up the car and brought my Rottweiler dogs with me, and we came here, and I took him to the doctors, and they wanted to put him in the hospital, which I guess they had put him in once before, and he wouldn't stay. Well, they wanted a surgeon to see him, and he said, I'm not having them operate on me at this age. He was a stubborn man. He had his own ways, but my father was so intelligent. It's a shame, because he believed in solar energy and all the wind, the water wheel that he had down here. And they didn't, people thought he was crazy, but he wasn't crazy. They're finally doing some of these things nowadays. But he was sick, and he told the doctors and the attorney that that's why he had me. I was going to stay here and take care of him. He wasn't going into hospice. And so here in the living room, we had a hospital bed so that he could look up at the waterfalls. And he passed away about, I'd say a week after we were told that he was really bad.
So he was in his hospital bed here in this living room in front of the fireplace?
Yes, and been able to look up.
And looking up at the falls when he passed away.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, so many people have asked, how did Armar die? Where did he die? And you have just answered a question for an awful lot of people.
Oh, yeah. He wasn't going to stay in any hospice or anything like that. This was his home. He cherished it. But then so did I, and so did my mother. We loved it over here. There was nothing like this place to us. And my mother kept it so beautiful. So my father, when my mother passed away, started putting more things on the walls. But my mother kept it my mother was such a beautiful lady too. And my father was he was a little eccentric at times, but he was a very gifted man. Anybody that could build a home like this and do the woodwork the way he did it, I mean, you have to admire somebody that can do that.
Well, a lot of us do, and that's why we're working so hard to preserve it.
We're pleased that you are. We're so thankful.
Well, we're thankful that you took the time to come and visit us today. As you drove in, you saw all kinds of cement trucks and things in the driveway. What do you think about all this commotion going on around here?
I am so pleased that they are taking care of this place, because from what I always understood, the state was going to tear this home down, and I thought, how awful. Why would you tear down something so historic and so beautiful as this place was? Where do you find a place, even in the state of Pennsylvania or anywhere, with a waterfall and a cabin that was built like this was?
Well, now, I know one of the comparisons we often make is that this is our falling water. I saw the picture that you sent me of the cabin before the floors were in it and before the roof was on. And it was like the logs actually went out to the water, and so the porch is actually cantilevered, and it had the posts underneath apparently for extra support. And were you here while all that was going on?
No, that was before I was born. That was probably in the early 30s, and I was born in 1940.
Okay.
So, and my parents moved in here in 1939.
Okay. I think we're going to have to take a break here.